This way, you have African cultural dynamics allowing you to go to the top of the pyramid to seek and understand God. Our cultures have a God dimension. Turn it this way, and you have the European. In the search for land, labor, and resources, at the center, not a spiritual understanding of the universe, but a materialistic understanding of the universe. And systems, not enhancing the human spirit, but systems of domination, destruction, and death. And this value system of going down to this polarity leads not to godliness, but to devilishness. In search of materialism, you will be inevitably searching for the devil. Apply it to your own families, your own brothers and sisters, who feel that if they have some diamonds or a car, they're somebody. Who feel that if they rip off grandma and get some dope, they're somebody. Feel if they pilfer the land from their aunties, they're somebody. Money and property makes you somebody in the European world. And we've adopted that. Substance and character makes you somebody in the African world. And your spirituality. There are two value systems. The value system of godliness and the value system of devilishness. Now people will say, oh, Dr. J is calling Europeans devil. Well, look, anybody that's enslaved your people for hundreds of years, ripped off their land in the name of God, now taking your labor and using it and exploiting it and taking your mind, prostituting you, selling you dope while they make billions off of it. That's the work of the devil. That's the work of the devil. Now that doesn't mean that there are some Europeans that are not trying to seek God. But it's kind of rough when your whole culture is going this way. We thought there were Europeans seeking God. In fact, they were so ingenious they put God on the TV screen. And many of you thought that God was on the TV screen. And you sent your money into Jimmy Swaggart and you sent your money into these others because you thought they was bringing God to you easy on the TV screen. You didn't have to get up and even go and relate to your brothers. Put your hands on your brothers. Help out. You could sit in front of the TV screen where you saw what that God on the TV screen was. The work of the devil. Now many of you thought that if you work hard, save your money, and put them, 5 minutes, and put them in the savings and loans. You better get smart, take your money out, put them in some credit unions that you can keep a watch on the people. Put them in your church credit union. They ripped off. You worked hard, thought you were going to go to heaven. Saving your money, going to do the work of God. Well, the biggest thievery in the history of the world took place. They ripped your money out from under your savings loan, $500 billion, doing the work of what? The devil. We have to see that. They have been given a premium place in the world for the last 500 years. Why? Because of accidents of history. Their mindset of destruction and death wreaked havoc on the world. People who extended the hand of fellowship to them were ripped off. Africans on the west coast of Africa, Native Americans in this land, people in Australia, the people in New Zealand were destroyed after extending the hand of fellowship. So you have to see the link between land, labor, and resources of the European creating a system of imperialism and colonialism and a system of enslavement, where ships left Europe, went to Africa, took captives, went back to the New World. And it's this system that Walter Rodney calls the underdevelopment of Africa. You have to begin to understand it. That's why we have to look at the slave thing in a serious way. But not just academically, we have to document enslavement because we have to begin to raise reparations in 92 and 93. Reparations. Now we get into New World African scholarship. Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery. This is his PhD dissertation. He doesn't mention anything about Jewish people involved in enslavement in this, because this is a PhD dissertation. He probably had some Jewish professors on his committee. He didn't want to not get his degree, so he was smart. But Eric Williams, in From Columbus to Castro, details the enslavement process and details the Jewish involvement in it. Just turn to page 114 and page 151. I'll make it easy for you. Page 114, and it shows how sugar technology moved from Brazil to the Caribbean. And it was the Jewish community that moved it. Eric Williams, from Columbus to Castro. Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery. Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Walter Rodney, his PhD dissertation, Trade in the Upper Guinea Coast. And then we have a contribution coming from the Nation of Islam. But before we do that, I'd like to mention, there's a book by James Pope Hennessy, The Sins of the Fathers. And we need to put sins of the fathers and mothers. And then the particular role of the Jewish community, and we're not saying the Jews were the major people in enslavement. In fact, it's against our interest to say that. We want to be able to point to all of the Europeans involved. We want to be able to point to the Catholic Church. We want to be able to point to the Protestants, the Dutch, the Danes, the Germans, the English, the French, the Portuguese. It's the Jews that put themselves in the middle of the struggle to cloud the issue. We didn't put them there. They put themselves there. So in order to get at the real issue, we've got to move them out of the way by just bringing forth the truth. Just go to their own books. Jonathan Israel, European Jewry in the Age of Mercantilism. European Jewry in the Age of Mercantilism. Or if you can, get a book called Economic Activities of the Jews of Amsterdam, 17 and 1800. If you find that book, I'll give you $50 for it. Or if you really want to get a book, and I'll give you $100 for this one, The Jews of Germany by Lowenthal. That book details the white slave trade that the Catholic Church and certain Jewish merchants put together, selling white people into Arab slavery. Let me say it again. Catholic Church and Jewish merchants putting together a system of selling white folks into Arab slavery. And who are those white folks? The Slavic peoples. The term slavery comes directly out of reference to them. Before there was an African slave trade of significance across the Atlantic Ocean, there was the white slave trade for hundreds of years. That's why this information is so devastating. And you can see why they're coming at us. Because they've been involved in what? Not godliness. They've been involved in devilishness. And every European nation has fought over each other to try to get control of the devilishness. Well, it's over with now. I guess the minister Louis Farrakhan was tired of it. And he said, we're going to deal with the truth. They're going to take the little phrases that we say, twisted and distorted, and make a big thing about it. Jesse says something to make a big thing about it. Mr. Louis Farrakhan says something to make a big thing about it. Dr. Jeffries says something to make a big thing. Their whole institution of the movies is a devastation of us, and they have nerve enough to focus in on one or two things that we say. Well, Mr. Louis Farrakhan said, you deal with the truth, you deal with your intellectual abilities, and wipe them out. And out of the Nation of Islam has come, just like I told you, you've got to go to bed with this young book and carry it around so you get 2 copies. You need to get 2 copies of this. 1 copy for bedtime reading. I go to bed with books like this, falling out of my hand, and then I go off to sleep with a smile on my face. And you need this, you travel around with it. You go to a meeting of your staff, you know, how people have little girly magazines and stuff like that. No. And Emerge, don't buy that rag. Send to Emerge and tell them, the latest attack, I think it's on Minister Farrakhan, somebody told me. Emerge is a white magazine fronting for black folks. The head of research of Emerge is somebody called Jack Rosenberger, so you know what Emerge is all about. Calling itself a black magazine, and they've got somebody called Jack Rosenberger, the head of research. He's the one coming up with these titles, Melanin Madness, and all the mess. Look, what they do. Our truth is shining so bright and destroying them, knocking them down. You're on a victorious path. This book by the Nation of Islam, the major researcher was a young man in his 20s, a beautiful brother. Do you understand what that means? This was not produced by Dr. Jeffries, by Dr. Hilliard, by Dr. Karenga, by Dr. Ben, by Dr. Diop. This was produced by a young man, the major force behind this, a team of people working with them. Produced this monster work, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. This is volume 1. And it uses only outstanding and reputable Jewish sources. Nobody who can be called anti-Semitic. It uses their own sources that were so proud to be a part of white folks messing with us documented everything. See, that's what happens when a white boy wants to join them. He documents it. Look, I've done this for you. Aaron Lopez out of Newport was one of the leading slavers. He was telling Washington, my man, I've even done it better than you. You just got him at Mount Vernon. I got plantations in the Caribbean. I got factories on the west coast of Africa. I've got merchants in Liverpool and London. I got people in Charleston. I got people in Curacao. Aaron Lopez. And don't be fooled by the name. That's the Sephardic Jewish community. He was hooked up with his father-in-law, Rivera, two of the leading slavers. He had 30 ships running them out of Newport, Rhode Island, one of the leading slaving centers in the world. You got to get into this knowledge, brothers and sisters. Now, we brought these books here for you, and we want you to make sure we don't take them back. Now, this is an expensive book. And out there on the table, both of the book dealers have them, and you need to make sure that you go away with these books. Now, as a rule, we don't take checks from black people, but we will change that today. We'll stretch that a little bit. At any rate, the books are there, the knowledge is there. As I mentioned to you, and I'm trying to wind it up now, we're talking about number one, the African origin. The books are by Diop and others. Number two, the African evolution. The unity of Africa. Number three, the African cradle civilization. Number four, the African diffusion to other peoples in other parts of Africa. The double cradle theory. Number five, the stolen legacy of the Greeks. Number six, the African heritage of Judeo-Christianity, Islam. Number seven, the African factor in Islamic civilization. Number eight, the African underdevelopment, the enslavement, and the development of Europe. Number nine, the African influence in the making of the Americas. That's the Van Sertima book. Number 10 is the African factor in modern development. That's our history, our struggles. That's a whole other lecture. That's why you have to fight me out. Nobody else has the history of struggle as our peoples have. Struggling off those slave ships, struggling in the hills, highlands of Brazil, the Republic of Palmares, struggling in the hills of Jamaica and the other islands of the Caribbean, struggling back in the bushland in Suriname, struggling in the swamps of America, the linkage between the blacks and the Native Americans in terms of struggle. Nobody has your history of struggle. And that's why they want to keep it from us. I want to leave you with these last images, and then I'll fade into the wind. We are being so victorious that yesterday, the Jews in New York had a conference on a forum for Passover. They didn't invite me. We found out about it because they sent it to some other professor and we got to work. So of course we were there. Before I jumped on the plane, we had to show up, and then I went to the airport. The subject of this symposium is Jews and Slavery, Participation and Resistance. And then they have other titles. Historical perspectives on slavery, truth, responsibility, and subtext. Jews and the slave trade, much to do about very little. Jews and slavery in American history. Rabbinical responses to slavery during the Civil War. Most of us don't realize that many rabbis provided the rationale for enslavement by saying we were a cursed people. Many of you don't realize that there was not much resistance because most of the Jews were trying to be white and they were trying to show white folks they could do just like white folks do. So I'd like to find out when we get back and see the tape, what kind of resistance was they talking about? They didn't have much resistance to the Holocaust. Now, people are going to be upset about it. But it's important for you to understand that Jews in Europe wanted to be. They were wannabes. They were wannabe Germans and wannabe Austrians. And they worked so hard to wannabe that they looked and turned their heads when these things were coming. There were enough storm signals for them to have known that the Aryan myth that came not just from Hitler, it came from Kaiser Wilhelm, not just from Kaiser Wilhelm, it came from Bismarck, not just from Bismarck, it came from Nietzsche. They should have known that there was a context in which they were going to be destroyed in Europe. And because they were not prepared and wanted to be, they were not able to resist. The Warsaw Ghetto is a story of resistance, but there are not many Warsaw Ghetto stories. You don't want to be in that same position. You want to be Negroes. We need to move full blast into Africanness. taking back your African mind so you can socialize your people into their own values. That means you have to have an understanding, and this Asa here, you pull these together, of the pharaohs of ancient times, because they give you your tradition way past any European tradition. This is the pharaoh Zoser, who asked Imhotep to build the step pyramid of Saqqara, 2900 BC, one of the greatest men to have walked the earth, and his queen. If Michael Jackson had only had this image before he went crazy and deformed his African self. But this is Michael before deformation. In that same old kingdom, which lasted 1,000 years of glory, before the Europeans could read or write, they had a pot to pee in. Or as John Clark says, had a shoe or a house with a window. Africans were laying down symbols of greatness and transformation. This is the Sphinx, the symbol of transformation. That you can move with training and understanding and spiritual knowledge from the level of the beast, the base of the statue, to the human head, to the inner mind of God inside the human head that contemplates God. There's 3 levels of transformations in the Sphinx. And surprisingly, they have these outside of your libraries. Isn't it interesting? A pillar temple is a library, and outside of it they have lions. But you never compute that that's part of the African process of transformation. Old kingdom lasted 1,000 years, and glory took place for Africans, laying the foundation and science for much of the world. But then there was a period of decay. But it was a short period because up from the south again comes Africans. And they unified the kingdom and produced another walk of glory for another 500 years. Mentuhotep led the charge and his queen with greatness coming up from the south, just like Aha-Menes and Scorpio came up from the south to form the old kingdom. Here is the middle kingdom founder, Mentuhotep. Black man, not only in color, but look at those feet. If those are not black feet, I don't know what is. Full feet for your country. Mentuhotep. And following Mentuhotep were people in the 12th dynasty, such as Kheper Kare. This great brother, looking like my brother here. You see, this people have said, he's with his bodyguard. No. This is my brother. And my brother does what brothers do in the African sense. They take care of each other. Right. They take care and make sure that Middle Kingdom, looking like my brother Jack. But there are other pharaohs that follow. Europeans want to call these people black white folks. Well, let them do that. This brother is one of my favorites. Amenemhet III, 12th dynasty, 1800 BC. Now look at that brother. Now, this is another photo by Asa Higgins. Now, if the Europeans want to call this dude European, then I just can't deal with that. Well, what can I say? What can I say? If I saw him coming across the campus, I might run on the other side. This looks like a bad brother. I'm sure his wife knew how to handle him, though. But if you can't handle him front view, then you got to take him side view. This is Amenemhet III with his golden locks. And look, European hair don't lock up like that. Even though they produced that Bo Derek movie and tried to do something with that hair, European hair don't lock up like that. The female, the key to understanding African culture being African is the role of the female. She is center and she is complementary. Every African king is not a king without a queen. Every African family is not a family without a clan mother. This is Queen Amenes-Nefertari, 1550 BC. The invasion of the Hyksos had produced another dislocation in Africa. Up from the south again comes black power in the form of our ancestors. And they reunited the kingdoms again for another great walk in glory for another 500 years. Amenes-Nefertari. She's not in any history books. That's why we fought for the curriculum of inclusion. Then following her in the dynastic rule was the Tutmosis, Tahutimos. And this is the brother Tahutimos III. His sister was Queen Hatshepsut. Their father was a great man. This is the family traditions that you have, that they've kept from you. And that's why we have to get them back. But the key to that dynasty, that 18th dynasty, is this family. White boy teaches you the history in bits and pieces, so you know about King Tut. But how come you never say, how come we never see King Tut with his family? King Tut married. He married one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. How come they never hook him up in a family way? Akhenaten had a wife. She was Nefertiti. How come you see King Tut by himself? How come you see Nefertiti by herself? You never see them hooked up with family. Nefertiti was from Mitanni. She was mixed African-Asian background. She was invited in to be a diplomatic marriage, to marry into the family of King Tut. But when she was invited to marry the great king, Amenhotep III, as part of a diplomatic relationship with Queen T doing the inviting, the old man died. So Queen T, being a smart African woman, said, I'll hook you up with my son. I don't need to leave you around here, pretty woman like yourself. I'll hook you up with my son. So Queen T hooked Nefertiti up with her son, the Pharaoh Akhenaten, one of the greatest men in the history of the world, a revolutionary who raised anew the concept of the oneness of God in the Nile Valley. Akhenaten is always seen by himself. Nefertiti is always seen by himself. How come they're not seen together and they are a family? How come they're not seen with King Tut when their daughter Ankhesemen married the boy King Tutankhamun? You better have a good idea that they do not want you to see this continuity, this synthesis, because if you put it together, you would reveal the truth, because the foundation of every family is some mother figure. And the mother of it all is this beautiful woman. This one's for you, sister. Stand on the case and invite me. This is why they can't give you your story and your glory. This is a black woman from Nubia. She sat on the throne with equal majesty and power with her great husband Amenhotep III, who expanded the great lodge of Luxor. You go to the Cairo Museum, and the greatest statue in the Cairo Museum is a two-story statue of Queen T and her husband with equal majesty on the throne in the Nile. You know that Africans developed Nile Valley culture because the female principle is central. Europeans do not have it as a central principle. Semites do not have it as a central principle. Greeks don't have it as a central principle. This woman's husband was great. She was great. Her son was great. Her daughter-in-law was great. And her youngest son or grandson, King Tut, was great. How come she's not in every history book? How come she's not in every home? How come she is not known throughout the world? It is obvious. This is the key to the truth that destroys white supremacy. This is the truth that you have to struggle around. But since it is there to empower you, all you have to do is to embrace it and pull it to your bosom and let it motivate your mind. Rise, African people. Thank you for inviting me to say this.
Brothers and sisters, we had to make a very serious decision, and so as you might have suspected, we waived the question and answer period to allow Dr. Jeffries to finish his presentation. And knowing that we don't own and control this institution, we have to get out of here. But I think that, you know, we ought to get some kind of college credit for what we just went through, don't you think so? Dr. J? Everybody leaves, because the brother was serious about these books not going back in that airport. We want to allow you all to come and greet Dr. Jeffries, and hopefully, for those of you all who still have your ticket stub, that will allow you to get into Club Kilimanjaro for half price. We're going to try to get Dr. Jeffries over there so he can kind of loosen up. He's been under a lot of stress and strain, and the Ethiopian brothers and sisters have outstretched their arms to us and welcome us tonight. So that's down the road there at I-170 and Natural Bridge. I have one closing announcement, because I think that when we come together and we get the kind of empowering information that we have tonight, then we must do something. Brother Ben Hoover gave me a leaflet tonight asking you all to come out on Saturday at 11 a.m. Federal Building. Why? Because some of the folk that Dr. J talked about destroyed homes, businesses, and lives in Kinloch. Some of you are aware that it was in the Post-Dispatch. So a protest march in front of the Justice Department, 11 a.m. on Saturday. You need to be there. Put this under your arm, ready. This is the weapon. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for coming out.
are down front. We also have some posters, and we have a T-shirt for Dr. J. You can sign the books and the posters.
This is my son.
Yeah, I found it out.
Would you?
Which school do you go to?
Well, I don't right now.